My husband satisfied me goodbye for his business trip and locked the front gate with a heavy padlock from the outside. The moment his truck disappeared down the dusty road, my mother-in-law, who supposedly had severe dementia and hadn't spoken a coherent word in 3 years, suddenly grabbed my wrist with surprising strength. Her cloudy eyes became sharp and focused. She looked directly at me and whispered, "Don't eat dinner tonight. He's been poisoning your food for weeks. He wants you dead before Christmas." The old farmhouse creaked in the autumn wind as I stood frozen in the kitchen doorway. Margaret, my 72-year-old mother-in-law, was supposed to be a shell of her former self. The doctors said the dementia had progressed too far. She needed constant care, couldn't feed herself, couldn't remember her own son's name. That's why Daniel insisted we move to this remote property in rural Montana, 3 hours from the nearest town. "Mom needs peace and quiet," he'd said. "And I need you to take care of her. You're so good at that, sweetheart." I'd believed him. Of course I had. Daniel was everything I'd ever wanted. Handsome, successful, a devoted son who refused to put his sick mother in a nursing home. When we met 2 years ago, I was a struggling nurse's aide working double shifts at a care facility in Billings. He was the wealthy owner of a construction company, visiting his business partner. He saw me feeding an elderly patient with such patience and tenderness, he said. He knew right then that I was the one. A whirlwind romance, a fairy tale wedding, a beautiful farmhouse on 200 acres of private land. I thought I'd won the lottery. Now Margaret's bony fingers dug into my skin, her grip surprisingly powerful for someone who supposedly couldn't hold a spoon. "You're confused, Margaret," I said gently, trying to pull away. "Let me get your medication." "I haven't taken that medication in 18 months, she hissed. "It's sedatives. He gives them to me to keep me quiet. I've been spitting them out and hiding them under my mattress." My heart started pounding. This couldn't be real. Margaret had been practically catatonic since I moved in. She sat in her wheelchair by the window, staring at nothing, occasionally mumbling nonsense. Daniel changed her diapers, fed her pureed food, and spoke to her in that patient, loving voice that made me fall deeper in love with him. "Sit down, Rachel," Margaret said, her voice completely clear now. No slurring, no confusion. "We don't have much time. He'll check the cameras soon." "Cameras?" I whispered. She pointed to the smoke detector in the corner of the kitchen. "That's not just a smoke detector. There are 7 hidden cameras in this house. He watches everything on his phone. He's been monitoring you since the day you moved in." I felt the blood drain from my face. Instinctively, I started to look up at the smoke detector. "Don't look at it." Margaret grabbed my arm and pulled me down into a chair. "Act natural. Pretend you're helping me with something. He'll get suspicious if you suddenly start staring at the ceiling." I grabbed a napkin and pretended to wipe her chin, my hands trembling. "Margaret, what are you talking about? Daniel loves me. Daniel killed his first wife." The words hit me like a physical blow. I stopped breathing. "Her name was Jennifer," Margaret continued, her voice barely above a whisper. "She died in a car accident 3 years ago. That's what the police report says. But I was there. Rachel. I saw him cut the brake lines the night before. I watched from my bedroom window. No." I shook my head violently. "No, that's impossible. The accident." I was already showing early signs of dementia back then. Real ones. Minor memory issues. Confusion. When I tried to tell the police what I saw, Daniel convinced everyone I was having delusions. He had me diagnosed with rapid-onset dementia, put me on heavy sedatives, told everyone I couldn't be trusted. Tears started streaming down Margaret's weathered cheeks. "I've been trapped in this body for 3 years, Rachel. Pretending to be a vegetable because it's the only way to stay alive. If he knew I could think clearly, if he knew I remembered what he did to Jennifer, he would have killed me too. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream. But something in Margaret's eyes, something desperate and terrified and completely lucid, made me stay. "Why?" I whispered. "Why would he?" "Insurance money." Jennifer had a $2 million life insurance policy. Daniel's construction business was failing. He was drowning in debt from bad investments and gambling. The payout saved him. Margaret paused. "You have a policy too, don't you?" He insisted on it. My stomach lurched. Daniel had set up a life insurance policy for both of us right after we got married. "Just in case," he'd said with that charming smile. "I want to make sure you're always taken care of." The policy was worth $3 million. He renewed it last month, I whispered, remembering the paperwork he'd asked me to sign. Said it was just routine. Margaret nodded grimly. The policy has a 2-year waiting period for full payout on accidental death. You've been married for almost 2 years now, haven't you? 22 months. Our anniversary was in 6 weeks. He's been adding something to your food, Margaret said. Something that makes you tired, gives you headaches, makes you confused. I've watched him do it every night when he thinks no one is looking. He sprinkles it into your portion before he serves dinner. I thought about the past few months. The constant fatigue I couldn't explain. The brain fog. The dizziness. I'd been to 3 doctors in town, and they all said it was stress, maybe early menopause, maybe depression from the isolation. I thought I was losing my mind, I breathed. That's exactly what he wants. He's building a case, making you seem unstable, forgetful, clumsy, so when you have an accident, no one will question it. Margaret leaned closer. Rachel, listen to me carefully. In his desk drawer, there's a hidden compartment in the back. Inside, there's a burner phone. He uses it to communicate with someone. A woman. I've heard him talking to her late at night when he thinks I'm asleep. A mistress. Of course there was a mistress. Her name is Vanessa. She works at the insurance company that handles your policy. They've been planning this together for months. I sat there, my entire world crumbling around me, the loving husband who rescued me from poverty, the beautiful home that was supposed to be my sanctuary, the quiet, peaceful life caring for a sick old woman. It was all a lie. A carefully constructed trap. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Why not before? Because today is the day, Margaret said, her voice cracking. I heard him on the phone last night with Vanessa. He said everything is ready. He said when he comes back from his trip tomorrow night, it will all be over. He's planning something for tonight, Rachel. Something final. My hands were shaking so badly I knocked over the salt shaker. I quickly picked it up, trying to appear normal for the cameras. We need to call the police, I said. With what phone? He took your cell phone this morning, didn't he? Said he needed to update the software? He had. I'd handed it over without a second thought. The landline is disconnected. He told you it was a problem with the phone company, but he cut the wire himself. I watched him do it last week. Margaret gestured toward the window. The nearest neighbor is 20 miles away. The gate is locked with a chain from the outside. He took both sets of keys. We're completely cut off. Panic started to rise in my chest. Then what do we do? How do we... I've been preparing for this day for 3 years, Margaret said. She reached into the folds of her housecoat and pulled out a small leather pouch. I've stolen things. Hidden them. Waited for the right moment. She opened the pouch. Inside was a folded piece of paper, a small USB drive, and a car key. The paper is a copy of Jennifer's original autopsy report before it was altered. I found it in his files years ago. The USB drive has recordings, audio from his phone calls with Vanessa. I managed to get my hands on his burner phone one night and copied everything. She held up the key. And this is for the old pickup truck in the barn. He thinks it doesn't run, but I've been sneaking out at night for the past year, teaching myself to fix it. The engine works now. I stared at this woman I thought I knew, this helpless, demented old lady who couldn't feed herself. She had been playing a role for 3 years, surviving by pretending to be invisible. There's one problem, Margaret continued. The barn is 200 yards from the house. The cameras cover the front yard and most of the back. And Daniel checks the feed every few hours. If he sees us leaving, he'll come back early, I finished. Exactly. Like he did with Jennifer. She tried to run. She made it to her car in the driveway. He was back within 20 minutes. That's when Margaret couldn't finish the sentence. We sat in heavy silence. Through the kitchen window, I could see the sun starting to set behind the mountains. Orange and red streaked across the sky, beautiful and terrifying. What time is it? Margaret asked. I glanced at the clock on the wall. Almost 6. He usually checks the cameras around 7, right after dinner. Then again at 10 before bed. If we're going to move, we have to do it between those windows. She paused. But first, we need to give him a show, make him think everything is normal. For the next hour, Margaret coached me through the performance of my life. I made dinner, carefully avoiding the portion Daniel had pre-prepared for me in the refrigerator. Margaret explained that he always made my meals ahead of time, claiming it was to help me since I was so tired. Now I understood why. I dumped the poisoned food down the garbage disposal and made myself something fresh. Then I helped Margaret into her wheelchair, positioning her by the window in her usual spot. She let her head loll to the side, her eyes going vacant, her mouth slack. The transformation was chilling. She looked exactly like the woman I'd been caring for all these months. I ate dinner alone at the kitchen table, making sure to appear drowsy and confused for the cameras. I knocked over my water glass, fumbled with my fork, rubbed my temples as if fighting a headache. At 7 o'clock exactly, I felt a chill run down my spine. Somewhere out there, Daniel was watching, checking to make sure his plan was on track. My phone, the one he'd taken this morning, buzzed on the counter where he'd left it before he departed. I picked it up. A text from Daniel. "Hey, sweetheart. How are you feeling? You look tired at breakfast. Make sure you eat a good dinner and get to bed early. I'll be home tomorrow night. Love you." I typed back with trembling fingers. Just had dinner. Feeling really exhausted. Probably going to bed soon. Miss you. 3 dots appeared. Then, good girl. Sleep well. Don't forget to lock all the doors. I showed the message to Margaret, who had momentarily broken character to read over my shoulder. "He's making sure you're incapacitated," she whispered. "Whatever he's planning, he wants you weak and alone tonight." We waited. The minutes crawled by like hours. At 8:30, Margaret signaled me to help her to her bedroom. This was part of our routine, and the cameras would expect to see it. But instead of putting her to bed, we moved to the small bathroom attached to her room. The only room in the house without a camera, Margaret had discovered, because Daniel never imagined she could do anything there besides the functions he needed to assist her with. "Here," Margaret said, pulling a small duffel bag from behind the toilet tank. "I've been packing this for months. Flashlight, some cash I stole from his wallet, a few dollars at a time, water, granola bars, and this." She pulled out a small handgun. My eyes widened. "Where did you?" "It was Jennifer's. She bought it for protection, but she never had a chance to use it. Daniel hid it in the attic after she died. I found it 2 years ago." Margaret checked the chamber. 6 bullets. "I've never fired a gun in my life, but I practiced loading and unloading it hundreds of times in this bathroom." She handed it to me. The metal was cold and heavy in my palm. "You were a nurse's aide," Margaret said. "You're young and strong. If something goes wrong, you'll have to be the one to use it." I nodded, my throat tight. 2 hours ago, I was planning to make apple pie for Thanksgiving. Now I was holding a gun, preparing to escape from my own home. "The cameras," I said. "How do we get past them?" Margaret smiled, and for a moment, I saw the clever, resourceful woman she must have been before all of this. "That's the beautiful part. He installed a backup generator last year because of the frequent power outages out here, but the generator takes about 90 seconds to kick in after the main power goes out. If we cut the power to the house, we have 90 seconds of darkness before the cameras come back online." "How do we cut the power?" "The main breaker is in the basement. I can't get down those stairs in my wheelchair, but you can. When you flip the switch, you run straight out the back door and head for the barn. I'll meet you there." "Wait, what? How will you—" Margaret pushed herself up from the toilet seat and stood on her own 2 feet. Her legs were shaky but functional. She'd been exercising in secret, I realized, building her strength back in this tiny bathroom while the world thought she couldn't move. "I'm slow," she admitted. "But I can walk. I've been practicing every night for the past 8 months. The wheelchair was part of the act." I hugged her then, this incredible woman who had endured 3 years of hell to survive. She hugged me back, her thin arms surprisingly strong. "Thank you," I whispered. "Thank you for saving me." "Don't thank me yet," she said. "We still have to get out of here." We waited until 10 o'clock, when Daniel would do his final camera check of the night. I performed my bedtime routine, brushing my teeth, changing into pajamas, climbing into bed. Margaret was back in her wheelchair in her room, eyes vacant, head drooping. At 10:15, my phone buzzed again. "Daniel. Good night, sweetheart. Everything looks quiet. See you tomorrow." Tomorrow. He was coming home tomorrow to find me dead. At 10:30, I crept out of bed and made my way to the basement stairs. The old wooden steps creaked under my feet, each sound making my heart stop. The basement was dark and musty, filled with old furniture and boxes. The main electrical panel was against the far wall. I positioned myself in front of it, my hand on the main breaker switch. Through the tiny basement window, I could see the faint outline of the barn in the moonlight, 200 yards of open ground. I thought about Daniel's face. His smile. The way he used to hold me and tell me I was safe now. All lies. Every single moment. I pulled the switch. The house went dark. Completely. Utterly dark. I ran. Up the stairs, through the kitchen, out the back door. The cold autumn air hit my face like a slap. I sprinted across the yard, my bare feet pounding against the frozen grass. Behind me, I could hear the back door banging open again. Margaret, 50 yards. 100 yards. My lungs burned. My legs screamed. Then the lights came back on. The generator had kicked in. 90 seconds. We'd made it. I reached the barn and threw open the heavy doors. Inside, covered by a dusty tarp, was an old Ford pickup truck. It looked ancient, rusted in spots, but when I turned the key, the engine roared to life. Margaret stumbled through the barn doors, gasping for breath but grinning triumphantly. I helped her into the passenger seat and climbed behind the wheel. "The gate," I said. "It's chained." "Drive through it," Margaret said. "This truck weighs 3 tons. That chain won't hold." I gunned the engine, and we burst out of the barn, headlights cutting through the darkness. The farmhouse loomed behind us, every window now blazing with light. The cameras were recording, but it didn't matter anymore. We were already moving. The gate appeared in the headlights, a heavy iron barrier wrapped in thick chain. I pressed the accelerator to the floor. We hit it at 40 miles per hour. The impact threw us both forward, but our seatbelts held. The chain snapped. The gate flew open. And then we were on the road. Free. I drove for 20 minutes before I allowed myself to breathe. Margaret sat beside me, clutching the duffel bag, her face a mixture of exhaustion and elation. "Where do we go?" I asked. "There's a sheriff's station in Carlton, about 40 miles from here. Sheriff Rodriguez. He was a friend of Jennifer's family. He always suspected something was wrong with her death, but he could never prove anything." Margaret patted the duffel bag. "Now we have proof." My phone, which I'd grabbed from the counter during our escape, started ringing. Daniel's name flashed on the screen. Margaret and I looked at each other. "Answer it," she said. "Let him know his plan failed." I put it on speaker. "Rachel." Daniel's voice was tight, controlled, but I could hear the rage underneath. "What are you doing?" "Leaving," I said simply. A pause. Then, "Sweetheart, I don't know what's gotten into you, but you need to come back home. You're not well. The isolation has been affecting your mind. I've been worried about you for months. Save it, Daniel." "I know everything. The poison in my food, the cameras, Jennifer." "Vanessa." Silence. Dead, cold silence. "Mom told you." His voice had changed completely. Gone was the loving husband. This was something else entirely, something dark and frightening. I knew I should have put her in a home. I knew keeping her around was a risk. "She's smarter than you ever gave her credit for," I said. "Where is she? Is she in the truck with you?" "That's none of your concern." "Rachel, listen to me very carefully." His voice dropped to a whisper, intimate and terrifying. "You have no idea what you're doing. You have no proof of anything. Just the ramblings of a demented old woman. No one will believe you. And when you come back, and you will come back, things are going to be very different." I looked at Margaret. She held up the USB drive. "Actually, Daniel, I have recordings. All of your phone calls with Vanessa. Discussions about how to stage my accident. How to split the insurance money. How you did the same thing to Jennifer 3 years ago." More silence. I could almost hear his mind racing. "That's impossible," he said finally. "I was careful. You underestimated your mother. You thought she was just a burden, a prop to make you look like a devoted son. But she's been watching you, Daniel, listening, waiting, for 3 years. You're bluffing." "Am I? Don't worry, baby. It'll be just like Jennifer. Tragic accident, grieving husband, big payout. Then we can finally be together." "Does that sound familiar?" I heard something shatter on the other end. Daniel had thrown something. "You stupid woman," he snarled. "You think you can run? I will find you. I will find both of you. And when I do, you won't do anything." I interrupted. "Because in about 30 minutes, I'm going to be sitting in Sheriff Rodriguez's office with evidence of 2 murders. Well, 1 murder and 1 attempted murder. And your little girlfriend Vanessa is going to have a lot of explaining to do to her employer, Rachel. Goodbye, Daniel. I hope you enjoy prison. I hung up and turned off the phone. Margaret reached over and squeezed my hand. Neither of us spoke for the rest of the drive. Sheriff Rodriguez was a grizzled man in his 60s with kind eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor. He listened to our story without interrupting, his expression growing darker with every revelation. When Margaret produced the USB drive and the altered autopsy report, he called in 2 deputies and had them start securing evidence. I always knew something was wrong with Jennifer's death, he said quietly. She was terrified of Daniel in the months before the accident, confided in her sister that she wanted to leave him. But then she died, and everyone said I was just a small-town cop looking for drama where there wasn't any. He looked at Margaret with something like awe. Ma'am, you survived 3 years of hell to bring this man to justice. That takes a special kind of strength. Margaret simply nodded. She looked exhausted, older than her years, but there was peace in her eyes for the first time since I'd met her. Daniel was arrested at 6 in the morning, trying to cross into Canada. Vanessa was picked up at her apartment 2 hours later, still in her pajamas, a suitcase half-packed with cash and jewelry. The trial was a media sensation. The charming businessman, the murdered first wife, the poisoned second wife, the mother who pretended to have dementia for 3 years to survive. It had everything the public craved. The prosecution played the recordings in court. Daniel's voice, cold and calculating, discussing how to make my death look like an accident. Vanessa's voice, excited and greedy, talking about the life they would live with the insurance money. The jury deliberated for less than 4 hours. Daniel was convicted of first-degree murder in the death of Jennifer, attempted murder in my case, insurance fraud, and a dozen other charges. Life in prison without the possibility of parole. Vanessa got 25 years as an accessory. When the verdict was read, Daniel looked at me across the courtroom. His handsome face was gaunt now, his eyes hollow. He mouthed something. I couldn't tell if it was "I'm sorry" or "I'll kill you." It didn't matter either way. I walked out of that courthouse into the autumn sunshine, Margaret beside me in her wheelchair. Not because she needed it anymore, but because she was tired. 3 years of constant vigilance had taken its toll. The doctors said she would need time to recover, both physically and mentally. But she was alive. We both were. 6 months later, Margaret and I stood in the driveway of a small cottage on the Oregon coast. It wasn't fancy, but it had a view of the ocean and a garden where she could grow her roses. I'd bought it with the money from selling the farmhouse, which was legally mine after the divorce. Are you sure you'll be okay on your own? I asked, helping her with her bags. Margaret smiled, her face fuller now, healthier. The fog of sedatives had cleared completely, and she was sharp as a tack. I survived 3 years pretending to be a vegetable while living with a murderer, she said. I think I can handle a cottage by myself. I laughed, but tears were forming in my eyes. I'm going to miss you. You'll visit every month, she said firmly. I expect fresh flowers and detailed updates on your life. And when you meet someone new, and you will, bring him here first. I want to look him in the eye before you commit to anything. After Daniel, I'm not sure I ever want to. Don't let one monster ruin your faith in people, Margaret interrupted. There are good men out there. Just be smarter next time. And know that you can always spot the signs if you're paying attention. She hugged me tightly, this woman who had become more of a mother to me than my own had ever been. Thank you, I whispered. For everything. Thank you for being worth saving, she whispered back. I drove away from the cottage with tears streaming down my face, but they weren't sad tears. They were tears of relief, of gratitude, of hope. My phone buzzed, a text from an unknown number. I pulled over, my heart suddenly pounding. It was a photo. Daniel, in his orange prison jumpsuit, staring at the camera with dead eyes. Below it, a message. He tried to escape last night. He didn't make it. Thought you should know. I stared at the screen for a long moment. Daniel was dead. I didn't know how to feel about that. Relief? Satisfaction? Nothing? I settled on nothing. He wasn't worth any more of my emotional energy. I deleted the message, put the phone down, and drove toward the setting sun. In my rearview mirror, the past grew smaller and smaller until it finally disappeared. I was free. And somewhere in a cottage by the sea, a 72-year-old woman who had fooled everyone was finally living the peaceful retirement she deserved, all because she refused to let evil win. Some people think the weak are helpless. They underestimate the quiet ones, the invisible ones, the ones they dismiss as burdens. But sometimes, the people you think can't fight back are the ones who've been planning their victory all along.